It was supposed to be a beautiful Mother's Day, the kind where sunlight spills through the curtains and you feel, just for a moment, that life has been kind to you. I wore my favorite green dress that morning, the one with soft lace sleeves. It always made me feel like myself again, not just someone's mother or grandmother, but a woman with her own quiet grace. I picked fresh flowers from my garden and baked sweet rolls for my grandchildren. I even tied a pink ribbon around the basket. "Grandma Grace," the little one shouted when I arrived, running into my arms. Their hugs were warm, the kind that make all the years of sacrifice fade away for a heartbeat. For that brief moment, I thought everything was fine. I thought this family, my daughter, her husband, my grandkids, was still my home. But I was wrong. Danielle, my daughter, came out of the kitchen with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her husband, Michael, stood behind her, his arms crossed, watching me like he was already tired of the day. "Mom," Danielle said, "we have something special for you." I sat down on the sofa, surrounded by the people I loved most in the world. My heart swelled with anticipation. Danielle pulled out a pink card with flower drawings all over it, clearly made by the kids. She handed it to me and said softly, "Read it out loud, Mom, so everyone can hear." My hands trembled slightly as I opened the envelope. The front said Happy Mother's Day, and for a moment, my heart fluttered with joy. I began to read. "Roses are red, violets are blue." But then, the next line stopped my breath. "You're a heavy burden. No one wants you here. Your time has passed. It's time for you to go." The room went silent. 3 seconds of absolute stillness. Then came the laughter. Michael laughed first, a low, mocking chuckle that turned into full amusement. Danielle tried to cover her mouth, pretending to be shocked, but her shoulders were shaking with laughter too. Even the children giggled, not understanding what was funny, only that the adults were laughing. "Did you see her face, Mom?" Danielle said between laughs. "You should have seen yourself, Michael. Did you get a picture?" My heart, it just shattered. The card slipped from my trembling hands and fell to the floor. I could barely see through the tears clouding my vision. "It's just a joke, Mom," Danielle said, as if she were explaining something harmless. "You've always been so dramatic." Michael bent down, picked up the card, and smirked. "Relax, Grace. We were just teasing. But, you know," he hesitated for a moment, "maybe it's time to think about other options." "Other options?" I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. Danielle crossed her legs, her tone calm, almost rehearsed. "There are some great senior living communities nearby. You'd be with people your age. You'd be more comfortable." Senior living. The words rang in my ears like a sentence. Like they weren't suggesting care, they were suggesting I disappear. "But I thought I was here to celebrate Mother's Day," I said, my voice cracking. "And you are," Michael replied casually, pouring himself another cup of coffee. "But we also have our own lives, Grace. You're not young anymore. You need special care." I looked down at the children, my grandchildren. The oldest one, only 8, looked at me with confusion. "Grandma, why are you crying?" Before I could answer, Danielle pulled him away. "Come here, sweetheart. Grandma's fine. She's just being sentimental." I sat there, surrounded by laughter and silence all at once. My heart ached so deeply it felt like breathing hurt. That day, on the one occasion meant to honor mothers, I became a joke in my daughter's living room. When I finally stood up to leave, my legs trembled, but I kept my head high. "I should go," I said softly. "Okay, Mom," Danielle replied without even standing. "We'll call you later." But I knew they wouldn't. I walked to the door, clutching my purse, forcing every step to look steady. The sunlight outside was blinding, but it couldn't hide the truth. That day, I didn't just lose a family gathering. I lost the illusion that I still had a family. That night, I sat alone in my living room. The laughter from earlier still echoed in my head like a cruel refrain I couldn't turn off. The pink card lay on the table beside me. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away yet. It was proof of what I had become, a burden disguised as a mother. I closed my eyes, and the memories came back like waves. Before Danielle became the woman who handed me that card, she was the little girl who clung to my skirt when she was scared of thunderstorms. Her father had left us when she was just 3. One morning, he was gone, no goodbye, just a note on the kitchen table. I can't do this life. I'm sorry. I remember standing there, holding that note with trembling fingers, hearing Danielle's small voice behind me. Where's Daddy? I told her he had to go far away for work. I didn't have the heart to tell her the truth, that sometimes love leaves without warning, and you're left to pick up its pieces alone. That night, I made a promise. She would never go without anything. Not food, not safety, not love. And I kept that promise. For 15 years, I worked double shifts at the textile mill. The machines roared so loud I could barely hear myself think. I'd come home long after dark, my hands rough with calluses, my back aching. But when I peeked into Danielle's room and saw her asleep, the pain softened. On weekends, I cleaned offices to save for her education. I skipped dinners, patched my own clothes, and told myself it didn't matter. Her future was worth every sacrifice. When she got accepted into nursing school, I cried harder than I had in years. She hugged me and said, "We did it, Mommy." She didn't say I did it.
She said we.
And I believed that word would always include me. To help pay her tuition, I sold the last valuable thing I had, my mother's jewelry. Delicate pieces of gold that had survived generations of women who worked and hoped and loved too much. "Mom, are you sure?" she asked. "Yes, baby," I said. "Your education is more important than any gold in the world." When Danielle graduated, she looked radiant in her white cap and gown. I clapped so hard my palms stung. I remember whispering to myself, all the nights of sewing and praying, they led to this. Then came Michael. He was charming back then, polite, ambitious, the kind of man any mother would hope her daughter would find. He thanked me for raising such a strong woman. I believed him. When they decided to marry, I gave them half of my life savings, $12,000, so Danielle could have the wedding she dreamed of. I still remember handing her that check. "Mom, this is too much," she said. "Nonsense," I told her. "A wedding only happens once. You deserve it." And when they bought their first home, I gave them the down payment, $25,000 I'd spent decades saving. They called it a fresh start. I called it love. When the grandchildren came, I thought I'd finally reached the golden part of my life. Every morning at 6, I walked 6 blocks to their house to babysit while Danielle worked her hospital shifts. I made oatmeal, packed lunches, brushed little teeth, braided tiny curls. I'd hum the same lullaby my mother once sang to me. Sometimes, when I tucked them into bed, the youngest would whisper, "Grandma, you smell like cookies." And I'd laugh. "That's just love, sweetheart." For 3 years, I was there every day, unpaid, unthanked, but happy. Because I thought that's what mothers do. Keep giving, even when no one notices. And when life got hard for them, when Michael lost his job, I gave again. "Just for a little while, Mom," Danielle said. "Until he finds something better." I started sending them $500 a month. 6 months later, Michael got a new job, but they never told me to stop. The transfers continued quietly, automatically. My heart kept justifying it. They need help. That's what family does. But now, sitting in my quiet house, I realized something painful. All those years, I had mistaken being needed for being loved. I thought love meant giving everything, my time, my money, my peace. I didn't see that love, when taken for granted, turns into expectation. That night, I wrote in my journal, the same one I'd used since Danielle was a child. "You gave her the world, Grace. But maybe, in doing so, you forgot to keep a small corner for yourself." I closed the book, turned off the light, and whispered to the darkness. Where did all that love go? It didn't happen all at once. The distance grew like dust gathering in corners, so slowly, so quietly, that I didn't notice until everything around me was covered in it. At first, it was little things. Danielle stopped asking for my advice. When I offered suggestions about the children, what to feed them, how to soothe their coughs. She would smile politely and say, "Thanks, Mom, but we've got it." Michael started sighing when I stayed too long after dinner. The grandkids, once thrilled to see me, began to drift toward their screens instead. I told myself it was normal. Children grow up. Families get busy. But the truth was harder. They were getting used to a world where I didn't take up space. One afternoon, I arrived at their house earlier than usual. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen, and laughter echoed from the patio. I smiled, ready to join them. But as I reached for the door, I froze. Through the screen, I heard Michael's voice. "Yeah, my mother-in-law lives alone now," he said, half laughing. "She's starting to get dependent. You know how they get at that age." A pause. "Then, we're looking at options. Maybe a proper place for her." A proper place. He said it so casually, as if I were a misplaced object that needed storage. My chest tightened. My throat burned, but no tears came. Just silence, heavy and suffocating. I stepped back quietly, not wanting them to know I'd heard. For the first time, I felt like a ghost haunting a home I'd helped build. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the sound of the clock ticking, one lonely second after another. The same clock that once marked bedtime stories, family dinners, laughter. Now, every tick sounded like a reminder that my time in their lives was running out. Still, I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe Michael didn't mean it that way. Maybe Danielle didn't agree. Maybe, but deep down I knew she did. The next day, I came over to help with the kids, as usual. Danielle met me at the door with a forced smile. "Mom, you don't have to come every day, you know. You should rest. You're not as strong as you used to be." Her words were soft, almost kind, but they landed like stones. Later that week, when I mixed up the children's vitamins, a simple mistake, Michael said under his breath, "This is why we need to start thinking ahead." He said it like I wasn't even there, like I had already become someone to plan around, not someone to care for. I smiled anyway. I smiled because mothers learn early that silence keeps the peace. But that night, I cried quietly into my pillow, whispering into the darkness. When did helping turn into interfering? When did caring turn into being in the way? Months passed. They stopped asking me to babysit as often. Family dinners became fewer. When I called, Danielle often said she was too busy. One Sunday, I found out from a neighbor that they'd hosted a big birthday dinner for Michael, 20 guests, laughter spilling into the night, and I hadn't even been invited. When I asked Danielle about it, she said, "Oh, Mom, it was small. You'd have been bored." But I saw the pictures later on social media. There she was, my daughter, my grandchildren, Michael's mother smiling proudly beside them. And there was an empty chair at the edge of the table where I should have been. I realized then that I had been slowly edited out of my own family portrait. I became the woman they mentioned in past tense. The one who helped so much back then. The one who should probably rest more. The one who existed more in memory than in the room. And yet every time they called asking for help, with bills, school supplies, car repairs, I still said yes. Because saying no felt like cutting the last thread that connected us. But that thread was already fraying. I just didn't want to admit it yet. That evening, I sat by my window, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. The world outside was alive, couples walking, dogs barking, kids on bikes. But inside my house, the quiet was deafening. That was the night I wrote a single sentence in my journal. It's a strange thing, to live long enough to see your own love outgrow its welcome. The night after the Mother's Day humiliation, I couldn't sleep. The words from that card echoed over and over like a cruel lullaby I couldn't silence. "You're a heavy burden. No one wants you here." I sat in my living room, wrapped in an old knitted shawl, staring at the flowers I had brought to their house earlier that day. They were still fresh, their petals open and bright, as if mocking me for believing love could still bloom in that home. I felt hollow. Not angry, not sad, just empty. As if something inside me had quietly died. And yet, somewhere in that quiet, a small spark of something else began to grow. Not rage, not revenge,
clarity.
For 74 years, I had lived believing that love meant giving, even when nothing came back. But now I understood, love without respect is just servitude with a smile. That realization hit me like cold air. And once I felt it, I couldn't unfeel it. I stood up, walked to my bedroom, and opened the bottom drawer of my dresser, the one I hadn't touched in years. Inside was a wooden box. My mother's box. The same one she gave me before she passed, saying, "Keep this close. It holds more than money, it holds choice." Inside were documents, yellowed but neatly folded, deeds, investment papers, and bank statements. You see, my family never knew who I really was. After my mother died, I inherited a small beachfront property in Nassau, Bahamas, something she had kept secret from everyone. For decades, that property was rented out by a management company. The income went into an account I never used. I also had savings, investments made quietly over the years with the inheritance from my Aunt Lucille, a woman who believed in working hard and staying invisible. All this time, while my daughter thought I lived on a modest pension, I had more than $400,000 sitting untouched. I could have bought a new house, traveled, lived in comfort. But instead, I poured my energy and my heart into keeping Danielle's life comfortable, into paying for her dreams, into saving a family that didn't even see me. I thought about every check I'd written, the $25,000 for their down payment, the $12,000 for their wedding, the $8,000 for that kitchen renovation, the endless $500 transfers just until things got better. And all those quiet extras for computers, school supplies, car repairs, bills. When I added it up, the total was staggering. $67,000. $67,000 and not a single thank you that wasn't laced with entitlement. I ran my finger along one of the documents, the deed to the condo in Nassau. For years, I had kept it hidden, thinking one day I'd leave it all to Danielle. But now, looking at the paper in my hands, I realized something simple and heartbreaking. She didn't deserve it. It wasn't bitterness speaking. It was truth. My daughter loved the idea of a mother who provided, but not the woman who sacrificed. She saw my giving as a duty, not a gift. I took out my checkbook and wrote one last note to myself on the cover. No one values what they think will never end. So end it, Grace. The clock ticked softly in the silence, the same clock that had once counted down the years I spent waiting for gratitude. But that night, its sound felt different. It no longer measured my fading relevance. It measured something new, time that now belonged to me. I poured myself a cup of tea, sat down at the kitchen table, and opened my old journal. The first page was dated 1989, Danielle's first day of school. I had written, "She smiled at me from the gate. I told her, 'Go shine, my love.'" Now, 35 years later, I added another line beneath it. "You did shine, Danielle, but you forgot who built the light." I closed the journal and took a deep breath. The pain was still there, but it no longer owned me. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about how to make my daughter proud. I was thinking about how to make myself free. That night, I stayed awake until dawn, planning the next chapter of my life. By sunrise, I knew exactly what I needed to do. It was time to stop being the invisible mother. It was time for them, all of them, to see who Grace truly was. By morning, the silence in my house felt different. It wasn't the same silence of loneliness. It was the kind that comes before change. The first light of dawn crept through the curtains, and I sat there at my kitchen table, a cup of tea turning cold in my hands, watching the world wake up. Birds sang, the neighbors' sprinklers hissed, and somewhere inside me, something began to stir, something I thought had died years ago. Determination. For decades, I'd been the woman who waited for appreciation, for gratitude, for a simple, "Thank you, Mom." But that morning, I realized I was done waiting. If my daughter and her husband saw me as a burden, I would show them just how much weight I'd been carrying all along. I opened my laptop, brushed away a thin layer of dust, and logged into my bank account for the first time in months. Numbers filled the screen, numbers I'd worked a lifetime for. My late mother's inheritance, Aunt Lucille's careful investments, the condo in Nassau I'd never even seen. I wasn't poor. I was powerful, and I had been hiding that power behind humility for too long. I started with the simplest step. I canceled the automatic transfers to Danielle's account. Every month, $500 disappeared into their lives. Groceries, bills, maybe takeout dinners I was never invited to. Not anymore. I clicked Cancel Recurring Payment. Next, I closed the Family Emergency Savings account, the one that was always there for their emergencies, never mine. When the bank manager asked, "Are you sure, Mrs. Grace? That account's been active for years," I smiled gently and said, "Yes, and I've been asleep for years too. It's time to wake up." I left the bank with a sense of lightness I hadn't felt in decades. Every step I took home felt like reclaiming a small piece of myself. Back in my kitchen, I poured a fresh cup of tea, sat at the same table, and opened my old leather notebook, the one that had seen my tears, my hopes, my lists of bills and birthdays. This time, I opened to a blank page and wrote in neat cursive, "To Danielle and Michael. By the time you read this, I'll be gone." The words came easily, like they'd been waiting inside me all along. I didn't mean gone as in dead. I meant gone as in free. I wrote slowly, carefully, like each word needed to be exact. For years, I gave you everything I had. Not just money, but time, love, and the kind of loyalty that doesn't ask for anything in return. I gave you my youth, my strength, and the pieces of myself I never got back. But I finally understand something. Love is not meant to be an endless debt. It's meant to be mutual. You have mistaken my kindness for weakness. You have turned my giving into an obligation. But the truth is, I was never your burden. I was your foundation. I paid for your beginnings. And now I'm paying for my own. I paused. My pen hovered over the paper. The air around me felt still, heavy with memory and liberation. Then I continued. I've decided to live out the rest of my years on my own terms. Don't come looking for me. Don't send apologies you don't mean. Don't use my grandchildren to reach me. When you chose to humiliate me, you made your choice. Now I'm making mine. I signed it simply, Grace. The name felt new again. My name. Not Mom, not Grandma, not the help. Just Grace. That afternoon, I called my lawyer, Mr. Franklin. He'd known me since Danielle was in high school, and he sounded surprised when I asked to change my will. "Are you sure you want to do that, Grace? It's a big step." "Yes," I said calmly. "I've been giving all my life. It's time to give wisely." I changed everything. Every cent that would have gone to Danielle and Michael now went to a foundation for abandoned seniors. I knew too many women like me, women who gave everything to their families and ended up alone. I wanted them to have what I had just found, the courage to start over. That night, I packed a small suitcase. Just a few dresses, my journal, and the deed to the Nassau condo. As I zipped it closed, I looked around my house, the faded photos, the quiet furniture, the memories that no longer held warmth. It wasn't sadness that filled me. It was peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of being alone. I was afraid of staying invisible. So I whispered to the empty room, "Tomorrow, they'll learn who I really am." And I smiled, not out of spite, but out of freedom. Because sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for the people who took you for granted is to let them feel your absence. The morning of my departure arrived quietly. The sky was pale blue, the kind of gentle color that makes you believe life is starting over, even when you're 74. I woke up before the sun, made a pot of tea, and sat by the window with my journal. The house was still, peaceful. For years, I had filled these rooms with the noise of love, birthdays, lullabies, phone calls from Danielle. Now, all that was left was the ticking of the clock and the sound of birds outside, welcoming a new day. A small suitcase waited by the door. Inside it, 3 dresses, my mother's pearls, the deed to my Nassau condo, and my letters, the last words my daughter and her husband would ever receive from me. I picked up the envelope with Danielle's name. The paper was thick, the handwriting careful. I had written and rewritten those lines until every word carried the exact weight of my truth. My dearest daughter, By the time you read this, I'll be gone. I haven't died, though in your eyes I may as well have. I've simply chosen to live. You once wrote me a card that said I was a burden. You laughed while I cried. But what you didn't know is that the woman you mocked that day had carried you through every storm of your life. I sold my mother's jewelry to pay for your education. I cleaned offices while you slept. I built your world brick by brick, while mine quietly crumbled. You thought my love would never run out. But even oceans have tides, Danielle. Even mothers have limits. From this day forward, you will stand on your own, because the hands that once caught you when you fell will no longer be there. I hope one day you'll understand that I didn't leave out of anger. I left out of love, the kind of love that finally includes myself. Grace. I folded the letter carefully and placed it beside another, one addressed to Michael. His words would be shorter, but sharper. Michael, I once saw you as the son I never had. You thanked me for raising a strong woman, and then spent years teaching her to forget where she came from. You spoke of finding a proper place for me. You'll find it now. It's anywhere you're not. I wish you peace, and I wish you growth, but from far, far away. I placed both letters in an envelope marked for Danielle and Michael. Open when I'm gone. Then I took a third, smaller one from the stack, addressed simply, to my grandchildren. My hands shook as I wrote their names. My darlings, Grandma loves you more than words can say. One day, when you're old enough, you'll hear things about me, some true, some not. But know this, love is not measured by what people say about you. It's measured by what your heart remembers. If you remember laughter, stories, and the smell of cookies, then I've done my job. Be kind. Be grateful. And when you grow up, never let anyone treat your love like a burden. With all my heart, Grandma Grace. When I finished, I sat for a long while, holding the letters against my chest. My tears weren't bitter this time. They were soft, like rain after a long drought. At 9 a.m., I called a taxi. The driver, a young man with kind eyes, loaded my suitcase into the trunk. Heading somewhere special, ma'am? He asked. Yes, I said quietly. Somewhere peaceful. As we drove through the neighborhood, I looked out at the houses, the lawns, the mailboxes, the lives that looked so ordinary from the outside. I wondered how many mothers like me lived behind those windows, invisible in their own families, giving until there was nothing left. When the taxi turned the corner past Danielle's house, I saw the pink roses blooming by her porch, the same kind of flowers I'd brought on Mother's Day. I didn't cry this time. I simply whispered to myself, "You don't owe your life to people who laugh at your pain." At the post office, I mailed the letters. I watched as the clerk dropped them into the outgoing slot, small, white envelopes carrying decades of love, disappointment, and truth. Then I walked out into the sunlight, feeling the warmth touch my face. The air felt different, lighter, freer, like I was breathing for the first time. By evening, I would be on a flight to Nassau. By nightfall, they would find the letters. Somewhere between those two moments, I would stop being the woman they pitied, and become the woman they never truly knew. The plane lifted off just as the morning sun began to rise. Through the window, I watched the clouds turn gold, soft ribbons of light stretching across the sky. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about what I'd left behind. I was thinking about what was finally ahead. As the engines hummed, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. There it was, silence. But not the heavy kind that used to fill my house. This was a peaceful silence, the kind that lives inside freedom. I didn't cry. Not once. I had cried all my tears years ago, in dark kitchens on cold nights, in empty living rooms. This time, I just breathed and let the weight fall away. When we landed in Nassau, the air wrapped around me like a warm embrace. The scent of salt and flowers filled the breeze. Palm trees swayed lazily against the blue sky. For a moment, I stood outside the airport, suitcase in hand, feeling small but alive, like a seed finally touching sunlight. A taxi took me down a narrow road that curved along the coastline. The ocean glittered like glass. I rolled down the window, letting the warm air rush against my face. I whispered to myself, So, this is what peace feels like. The driver dropped me off in front of a modest 3-story building painted coral pink. My name was on the deed, but it felt unreal seeing it in person. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lemon and sea salt. I walked through the room slowly, each step echoing softly, as if the walls themselves were welcoming me home. In the living room, sunlight streamed through wide glass doors that opened to a balcony overlooking the sea. The waves below moved in rhythm, calm and endless. I set my suitcase down, stepped out barefoot onto the balcony, and let the wind lift the last remnants of my old life from my skin. That night, I sat with a glass of tea and opened my phone. Dozens of missed calls. Danielle's name flashing again and again. I didn't answer. There were messages too, first confusion, then anger, then desperation. Mom, where are you? You can't just leave like this. We need to talk. And finally, one that read simply, please.
I didn't mean it that way.
But I couldn't reply.
Not yet.
Sometimes silence says more than words ever could. Instead, I opened my journal and began to write. Nassau, Day 1. The ocean is louder than my memories. The sky smells like forgiveness. For 74 years, I gave. Today, I begin to receive, not from others, but from life itself. The next morning, I walked to the beach. The sand was warm, soft beneath my feet. I let the water wash over my ankles, gentle, rhythmic, forgiving. A few children were building sandcastles nearby, their laughter floating in the air. One little girl waved at me. I waved back, smiling. For the first time in years, I wasn't someone's mother, or burden, or afterthought. I was simply Grace, a woman standing by the sea, breathing without apology. That afternoon, I visited a small cafe by the shore. The owner, a kind woman named Isla, served me mango tea and asked if I lived nearby. I do now, I said, smiling. It's a long story. She smiled back. The best stories always are. Later, back on my balcony, I watched the sun sink into the water, a slow, golden descent. The horizon glowed like fire. I thought of Danielle then, her laughter, her anger, her confusion. I didn't hate her. I never could. I whispered softly, one day, you'll understand that leaving wasn't punishment. It was mercy. A tear slipped down my cheek, but it didn't hurt. It felt clean. As night fell, the air cooled. Waves whispered against the shore like an old lullaby. I sat there, hands wrapped around my tea, feeling small beneath a sky full of stars. For decades, I taught my daughter to stand tall. Now it was my turn to stand for myself. And as the moon rose over the ocean, I finally felt what I had been searching for all along. Not love, not approval, not belonging.
Peace.
It has been 6 months since I arrived in Nassau. 6 months since the woman I used to be quietly died, and the woman I was meant to be finally took her first real breath. Each morning now begins the same way. I walk barefoot along the beach as the sun climbs out of the ocean, soft light touching everything it sees. The world feels wide again. The air smells of salt and jasmine. Sometimes I stop and watch the fishermen cast their nets, their laughter rising above the waves. Other times, I simply stand still, letting the tide wash over my feet, erasing yesterday's footprints. I used to believe that starting over belonged only to the young. But I've learned something beautiful. Life doesn't care about your age. It only cares about your willingness. At 74, I have learned to live for myself. There's a small community of women here, most of them widows or retirees who came to the island searching for quiet. We meet every Wednesday at the Seaside Cafe. We drink tea, share stories, and laugh the kind of laughter that doesn't need permission. They call me Miss Grace, and I smile, because for the first time, that name feels whole again. I've told them pieces of my story, the daughter who forgot me, the son-in-law who mocked me, the Mother's Day that broke me. They always fall silent when I reach that part, but I tell them not to pity me, because if not for that pain, I wouldn't have discovered my peace. Pain, I've realized, is not the end of love. It's the teacher that shows you how to love yourself better. Sometimes late at night, I sit on my balcony and write in my journal. The same old notebook, the same handwriting, but now the words are different. I no longer write about what I gave away. I write about what I'm keeping. My dignity, my quiet mornings, my laughter. I've heard from Danielle only once since I left. It was a letter, short, confused, full of regret. Mom, I don't understand why you had to leave. You've always been so dramatic. We didn't mean to hurt you. Please come home. There was no apology, only bewilderment. For years, I would have done anything to hear from her. I would have written back, explained myself, begged for understanding. But I didn't. I folded the letter gently and placed it inside my journal, between the pages where my tears once fell. Then I wrote underneath it, "Some people can't see your worth until your absence blinds them. Maybe one day she'll understand. Maybe she won't. But my peace no longer depends on that." I think about my grandchildren often. I imagine them growing up, remembering my cookies, my songs, my soft hands brushing their hair. And I hope, with all my heart, that when they love someone, they'll remember to say thank you. One evening last week, I sat with Isla, the cafe owner, as the sun melted into the horizon. She asked me, "Do you ever miss your old life?" I thought for a long time before answering. "I don't miss the life," I said softly. "I miss the woman I thought I could be in it."
She smiled, nodding.
"And who are you now?" I looked out at the sea, endless and calm. "I'm someone who finally stopped begging to be loved and started choosing to be respected." That night, I dreamed of my younger self, the woman at the sewing machine, her fingers bleeding, her heart full. I wanted to tell her everything, that the daughter she raised would one day forget her, that she'd lose everything and still find peace, that she would live to see herself not as a background character in someone else's life, but as the author of her own. When I woke, I whispered to the empty room, "You did it, Grace. You finally came home." Because home, I realized, was never a house or a family. It was the quiet place inside you where you finally believe you deserve better. Tomorrow, I'll plant jasmine by the edge of the balcony, the same kind my mother loved. I'll watch it grow, strong and fragrant, climbing toward the sunlight. And maybe one day, if Danielle ever finds her way to this island, she'll see those flowers blooming and know they were planted with forgiveness. Not the kind that invites her back, but the kind that lets me move forward. As the waves crash softly against the shore below, I close my journal for the last time. I don't need to write anymore. The story has already been told, not in words, but in the life I've built from the ruins of heartbreak. And if anyone were to ask me what I've learned, I would say this. You teach people how to treat you, but you also teach yourself what you're worth. It's never too late to start over. And peace is the loudest "I love you" you can ever give yourself. The sun sets. The ocean glows. And Grace, for the first time in a long, long life, is truly free.